All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you for, yes, it's noon already, 5 afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Nathan Brandt. I'm the Benefits and Wellness Program Manager for Panthers Active Wellness Services, and I want to thank you for being here today. We've got a lot that we're going to go over, but before we get started, make sure that you stop by the table, get a water if you haven't gotten one already, and get a Life is Why wristband, so that you can always have that constant reminder. And then if you happen to have any questions, needs, thoughts, you can always email us at pawswellness@fie.edu. Okay? So today we're going to be talking a lot about exercise and nutrition and the different specifics that you might need to know in order to help change some of those habits in regards to eating when you're first starting out with exercise. There's a lot of good information there. Hopefully it sparks your imagination and you have lots of questions for later, since that's how we all learn. And I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you, those that are streaming. And again, without any other interference or further ado, we're going to go ahead and introduce Amy Kimberlain. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you guys for joining me. Oh, thank you. Thank you guys for joining me during your lunchtime. I appreciate you guys coming out. As Nathan mentioned, my name is Amy. I am a dietitian and also a certified diabetes educator. Today's presentation, I kind of move around the room. Welcome to those that are streaming live as well. But today's talk is about nutrition and exercise. So I always kind of throw it out. What do you think of when you first hear about a presentation like that? And I'll repeat what you guys say so I make sure it's on the mic. What's the first thing that pops to your mind? Healthy food. What else? Are you eating correctly to doing like what the exercise is? Anything else? Like just first pop. So I think that the interesting thing about healthy eating is that when you're talking about including exercise, the biggest key point that I would tell you is it comes back to kind of the timing is everything. What do I mean by that? Are you a morning exerciser? Are you exercising after work? So I would challenge you as I'm presenting today to really kind of take that into consideration, because that's going to change everything. For me, food is fuel. Okay, I'll share a few personal experiences throughout today. However, that's also the irony. It's all individualized, right? So I'll share a few tips, a few little pointers, because I think that that helps people to see things applied within an actual training regimen. I trained for the Miami Marathon last year. I did it. It's over. 26.2 miles is no joke, okay? But I would tell you that it was really interesting to tie in the nutrition along with the exercise. So some of you may already have the exercise down in your mind. And now what you're trying to do is you're really trying to tweak the food, right? I had the food down. I didn't have the exercise down. So you've seen those memes or, little cartoon character type things that say it's 80% diet, 20% gym. Form those abs, right? It really, truly plays a direct role in what it is that you're eating. And where I say that food is fuel and food is medicine, again, my challenge for you today, you guys grabbed a Baptist plate on the way inside. We'll talk about that today because that's how everyone should be eating. It is overall healthy eating. And my encouragement is to really change one thing at a time. You may have come in here today saying, I'm going to do everything that lady tells me to do, right? And I love that. Believe me, I love the encouragement. But the truth of the matter is I think that if you start with one thing and you continue to build, you then set the path for overall healthy habits for a lifetime. So again, that's my encouragement, thinking as I talk today about just one thing that you might be able to change or to reevaluate, am I doing right? So as I mentioned, timing is everything. So go back into the exercise regimen that you're doing. Are you first thing in the morning or are you after work? Why is that important with food? You guys didn't know it was interactive today. And those online, feel free, however, you can throw a question at me. Why is the timing so important? You have to be fueled for your exercise. Hands down, one of the most important things. When I was waking up, I was running 4 days a week, okay? On my long run days, if it was like a 16 miler, 18 or 20 miler, during the week you're doing those runs, right? And this is also for first timers. I'm talking about real application of talking about food. Even if a goal of yours is to lose weight, You have to really apply what it is that you're eating because the two line up. But if I was doing short runs during the week, I would wake up at 5 a.m. I had a different job at the time, and if I'm running an hour, I had to be going, right? But that wasn't always where it stopped. I had to eat before I went on a run. Why? I have energy. But what's probably the biggest myth out there, and we'll talk a little bit about myths later too. Why can't I just run up and go? Wake up and go is what I meant to say. So I have energy stored that I could have pulled from. But again, the truth of the matter is I need fresh fuel. And that's what this picture is supposed to start to highlight and look at. The ultimate truth is our bodies are like cars. That's the number one analogy that they'll show you, is that when I look at it, really, truly, where am I tapping into? What fuel source am I looking at? And so we break down the three nutrients into the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fats. The preferred fuel source are carbs, right? Again, we need them. They're our fuel source. Not all carbs are created equal. We'll talk about them as they are all different. But the truth of the matter is that's my preferred fuel. And again, if I'm going for a short exercise period or if I'm going for a long, that makes up the difference in the timing. Obviously, GI-wise, what do I mean by GI? My stomach, and if I have to use the restroom, plays a part. And I'm not joking, but it's real life. You do need to consider that. You don't need to be out exercising or on a run or doing something, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa. So training for exercise and really applying it makes a big difference in looking at what it is that you'll use for your fuel. But carbohydrates are where it's at. So if I woke up first thing, I always made time to account for waking up a little bit earlier to get something in. Now, duration is another important part of that. Do I need to down a whole Gatorade just because I'm going for a 2-mile run? Okay, somebody laughed in the audience. No, you don't. But I think it comes back to, so we talked about timing is everything. It now plays a part in looking at timing of the exercise, meaning your duration. How long are you going for, right? Because that makes a big difference also in looking at this applied amount of nutrition for what it is that you're doing, that fuel and how it's applied. Proteins we'll talk a little bit about today. I have muscles. I'm a vegetarian. You don't have to eat animal-based protein to get muscles. So it's a big myth that's out there. It comes back into what you're talking about, routine and the actual type of training that you're doing. But you can definitely get enough protein. It's not your first fuel source. It would be carbs. And then fats also play a role. How do you think fats are important out of our three main nutrients? Fats can be converted into sugar. It's like not the first role, but it is. Just in an actual, I see a few people eating. How do fats play a role in food? They make food taste good. Yes? Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But when I think about fats, just understand digestion. They do take a little bit longer to digest. So if you are going out for something exercise-wise, you don't need a heavy fat-laden meal because then you're going to be feeling it literally. It's heavier. It's harder to digest. So again, kind of start thinking outside, again, where it's not totally to self-analyze and say, what is on my plate every time, right? It starts to become a habit, but I would think it's important to kind of really line up. My mom's Italian, so what do you think she gives me too much of? Everyone in the room says pasta. It is. And if I don't eat her food, that is love, by the way, to give you like extra food, right? So what I would tell you is it's still lining up in your head because I can pick on any culture. I pick on myself typically. But if I have pasta, where's the protein coming from? Don't believe me now. She makes fun of me all the time and saying, well, what am I supposed to give you for protein? You're a vegetarian. It's an education tool in how I can teach her, right? And then also the vegetables, which we'll talk a little bit about fiber. And I already mentioned the GI issues obviously that can come with that, but it's everything working together because your best fuel is a combination of all of these things. When I'm looking at fuel as a source, again, I think that what I think of is the preferred amped up fuel for your body. You're thinking of carbs, proteins, and fats. And how does it complement on a plate? And we'll talk more about the plate in a minute as I know you guys have that handout. What does this picture show? Why did I throw pretty fruits up there? I hear colorful. That's not the reason why, but that was good. The more colorful, the more vitamins. You guys are taking it to the next level, and I took it from like this whole other way when I saw the picture, but I love that you guys are thinking about it. We're all individual and we're all unique. And what works for you may not work for her. And I'm older than I look, right? And I only see one gentleman in the room, two gentlemen in the room. It's different based on your size, based on your age, based on that duration of your exercise, the intensity, the frequency. All of those things will make a difference. So the truth of the matter is I'm going to mention things that are general ideas of exercise and nutrition. And again, it's like real life application. How can I work it in for me? Because if I'm mentioning something that I did, just understand you need to test it out. Right? And again, it's like over time, I'm used to a lot of fiber. I have no problem with fiber, but if I tell you a snack I've made before and then you go out and you try it and then you come back and she's like, that lady made me like use the restroom a lot. It's starting with it, like I said, small and building up, because over time you'll adjust, right? But it's steps to build up to it. But yes, we all are individualized and unique. And I think that that's the ultimate thing to take away from today. What works for one may not work for another. So it's nice to talk about it and get ideas and then try it out, right? Because ultimately it may not work. What questions do you guys have before I kind of start getting into it? That was just the intro. You guys are quiet. So I put this slide up to show, again, and I'll bounce back. This one says run, eat, and I already kind of gave the answer. This one says eat, run. I'll go back. I'm lefty, and now I'm going the wrong way. Oh, no, go backwards. It's going all the way through my presentation now. We'll go backwards. Technical difficulties because I'm lefty. When you look at the ultimate, if I'm thinking of eat, run, or run, eat, I already answered the question for you. What do you have to take into account? Eating first, fueling first. Again, you're a car, you've gone up to the gas station, and do you want high octane or do you want low octane? You're going to run, you're going to function. It's not a matter of not functioning. It's just making sense of where you're tapping into your fuel from, okay? And if it's high octane, you're going to have a better, actual, more efficient workout than you would most times if you're tapping into what your stores would be. So again, I like for people to understand that. And again, it's one of those things, if you're exercising, anybody show of hands that exercises after work? Okay, so timing for you guys would be more like Wednesday afternoon, snack, possibly, right? And I use that word snack because I'm going to come through and show, thank you. I'll try not to go backwards and forwards. My leftiness. When you're looking at timing and when you're looking at meals and snacks, that's the ultimate. Am I going to have 3 meals a day with a snack in between prior to exercise? Or is my snack kind of, again, prior to my workout first thing in the morning? And now have I adjusted to make sure that I'm getting the fuel in before I go for the morning workout? So this is the plate that was created years ago. You guys have a Baptist plate, and I'll flash forward to that in just a second. But when you look at the plate, what makes up half of the plate? I heard fruits and vegetables. Grains I see is a quarter of the plate. You guys have the Baptist one, yeah. A quarter of the plate is also the protein, right? So when we look at and when we're paying attention to, so now there's the Baptist one, the main difference that we switched out is we took away what would be like kind of like in the area of the milk category. But when you're looking at this plate and when you're thinking about portion sizes, I go back to those nutrients that I was just talking about. Where are the carbohydrates found? Where's the protein found? Are the fats found? Right? And that's what we're going to discuss a little bit more in depth because I want people to really build their plate. Now, this is general. As I mentioned, it all changes based on age, size, body weight, all of those things, but it can grow exponentially, right? So of course, if when I was training, I didn't have that little rice. I had more, right? But it also meant I had to tap in and making sure I was getting more vegetables and more protein. It's not as if I just got to eat more carbs. Everything grew exponentially. Okay, why do you think we show water on the plate? We'll talk about hydration, but hydration is key as well. I mean, the key is you want to not dehydrate. I mean, I was walking across campus today just to get here. It feels like summer. And here in Miami, I mean, we'll show you the chart later on, but I'm stealing my own thunder. What color should your urine be? Like lemonade, I heard. What? So I hear clear, right? Palish yellow. If it's darker colored like that, you have problems, right? I have little kids all the time yelling out at me, yellow, white. And I'm like, your body's so amazing. And not only is it this like car that moves on the gas and the fuel that you give it, but it also gives you signs and symptoms. And if you're that dehydrated, it's like it's alert. Now, first thing in the morning when you wake up, it might not be. But again, I can't tell you how much water you need. You just really need to kind of pay attention to your urine. And if you're eating beets, right, I obviously, it's going to transform your urine as well. Because what comes out in an other way is that's what it's excreting, or some of the things it can't process and take in. So it can be red. But ultimately, urine is typically clear. So that's why we included water on the plate. I think it's so important to make sure that you're drinking before, during, and after. And one thing, if I didn't mention it in all honesty, with again, if anybody's heard of the term carb loading, you can see on this plate it's not portioned that way. I saw someone smile in the audience. Again, I would tell you that the meals leading up to exercise are even more important than just that one prior meal, right? You want to make sure your stores are always adequate and you're not having to totally tap into something like that. So it's the day in and the day out and how it builds up to lead into your overall healthy eating. Okay? What questions do you guys have? So here we go. We're getting into the nitty-gritty. Carbohydrates, as I mentioned, are your preferred source of fuel. The protein I mentioned, we'll talk about the muscle building and repair, and then the fats can help provide flavor. You don't want too high fat before a workout because of the GI issue and it taking longer to digest. But again, there's other vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and things included within the food that you're eating that ultimately, like I told you, create that ample total fuel package that you need. So again, you're looking at all of these things in order to become balanced, right? And really truly obtain all the nutrition that you need. So within the carbohydrates, one of the biggest things besides the fuel is that, again, it can help also keep your stores within where they need to be. So again, if you did miss something prior to a morning exercise routine, you're going to have your stores. Again, it won't be probably the best workout ever, but again, you will. I think that that's the number one myth that people hear. If I don't eat when I first wake up, what will I burn? Fat. And that's the misnomer. You're actually breaking down protein at that point. And then you're losing a little bit of muscle mass, which again is not the preferred source. So yes, again, we'll talk amounts and how much you need because it's not that much prior. Again, I mentioned sometimes people are exercising for many different reasons, and one of them could be for weight loss. So again, it's that balancing act of not taking in too much, but yet still having the ability to lose weight, which is what sometimes people do for exercise as well. Carbohydrates and where they're found, they're broken down into simple carbohydrates and complex. What do simple carbohydrates mean? Sugar, I hear. They're not complex. You'll see my joke in a minute. But the joke is when you're looking at, not the joke, when you're looking at simple carbohydrates, you're looking at the form, and it is literally just a few sugar molecules. It does not take that long to break down and process. So again, if I've forgotten to eat something prior to a workout, and I do need a little bit of fuel, these would be your preferred sources. Something like fruit, if you don't get any issues with GI like within yogurt or milks, those are also simple carbohydrates as well. Again, the word was mentioned, sugar. That is what carbohydrates break down into, and that is that fuel source running through your body. So again, ultimately, these would be sources. I hear it all the time. Again, sugar for me could be also honey, agave, things of that nature. Probably not the best preferred one that you're going to get for fuel, but just understand those are also sources of simple carbohydrates. If I'm running the marathon like I was, past an hour is when you need to supply with something so that your body is now circulating on that sugar in my body. That's what you'll see sometimes people will be doing, like a goo or a gel of some sort, in order to continue to fuel past that point of an hour, because that's typically the turning point where you do need to continue to sustain yourself. So again, paying attention to what it is that you're using. I was not ever able to use something that concentrated. I just used like little jelly beans for sports that also had electrolytes in them. So you find what works for you, right? So again, you're able to use something, but the simples, quick, in, out, okay? Complex carbohydrates, this is my joke. I always like to throw a little one in there. It is kind of funny because they are complex. They're hard to understand. When I look at complex carbohydrates, they break down into two different groups within the complex carbohydrates. So when you look at them, it would be your bread, your rice, your cereal, your pastas, right? But what's the difference between brown rice and white rice? Fiber, the color I hear. White rice has all the good stuff taken out. So again, the difference between these complex carbohydrates is some are called refined carbohydrates and some are called whole grains. And in any of the grains that you're selecting, whether it's rice, whether it's barley, whether it's wheat, they can all be in that circumstance where they're either processed and taken out of, like you said, the good stuff, and they try and add it back in, or it's a whole product and it does have everything that it started off with. The vitamins and minerals, the protein, the fiber. So again, go back to exercise. And if I want really quick energy, what might I use? This is not a trick. It is a little of a trick question, but not. You would probably use something like a white piece of bread. Dun, dun, dun. The dietitian said to eat a white piece of bread. Do not distort what I just said. Go back to food as fuel, right? And how am I using it for that exact piece of energy processing? I'm going to use it right then in the moment. And maybe that's the better source. So I had a friend running the Boston Marathon last year, and we were tweaking a few of his things. Anybody notice a picture up on the slide that is another carbohydrate that you thought maybe was a vegetable, but it's not? The potato. So a lot of vegetables, when we talk about them, are either starchy or non-starchy, okay? And if I'm looking up there, this includes potatoes, corn, peas, yucca, malanga, all of those kind of root type vegetables, and any of the winter squashes. Amazing sources of fuel. They really truly are. I think the white potato gets villainized over the years, but typically how do you eat a white potato? Chips or? You guys are saying all the condiments like butter, sour cream, but as French fries. So now it's the way it's been cooked, right? And again, if it's fried, heavy, fat-laden, it takes longer to digest. Again, within other issues of chronic diseases that we're talking about, that can wreak havoc. But again, back to fuel, potatoes are really good. And what he found is we would tweak, and he would try rice one day. And again, these are all the days leading up to his runs and things. He would try brown rice, he would try quinoa, he would try barley, he tried potatoes, sweet and the regular white. And what he found worked for him the best were the white potatoes. So again, go figure. You try and find the way that you can use these fuel sources, because as I said, what works for you may not work for her. But again, that is a form of a carbohydrate and a really good one, to be honest. It just goes back to how you cook it, okay? So making sense of carbohydrates and the complex ones, yes, the complex whole grains have fiber. So again, if you're training, if you're exercising, know it stimulates sometimes the bowel movement. So we'll talk about timing in a minute, but again, that's what fiber does. It literally takes things in and helps move things out. And it will happen. I've seen it on races. You had a question.
Yeah, so you work well, and there's so many other variables that it makes it. How do you define
So repeat it one more time. What works?
you mentioned in some instances it works well, and certain choices variables have.
Understood. So her question is, or kind of the thought is, there's a lot of different variables, whether it's a lack of sleep, whether it's you didn't stretch well and now you're more sore from the day before. This was a longer race week than it was, run days than the other week. You're absolutely right. And so again, that's just for testing it. We'll see what works best for you. And that's a hard question kind of to answer. But what he noticed is that he had easier runs on the days he did potatoes versus other things. So he tried to keep it stable for some of the runs, and then he would switch the grain or the carbohydrate. And that's just what he noticed semi worked well. What worked for me was rice. And it was brown rice throughout the week. I didn't alter and I didn't do white rice all the time. So remember, we're talking about the food is the fuel, and depending on the timing, what you'll use prior to workouts. But prior to my workouts, I use something else, which I'll mention when we talk about ideas. Right now, we're still just categorizing and looking at where the food can fit. But you're talking about these carbohydrates making up a really good percentage of your plate. Again, where it showed it only as a quarter, remember, when you are starting to exercise, your needs will increase. And again, it's making sense of how much of it that you are taking in. Fruits are also included in that carbohydrate source. So again, it's really the context of if I'm having some of the potato or some of the rice or some of the pasta, I might adjust the portion size of what I'm doing for the fruit. Okay, but all of those, again, on the up and up, I would tell you, you normally want a whole grain like brown rice. But on sometimes, if it's prior to a workout, you may need the refined, quicker energy source. Yes? So the question is about calorie reduction and helping with weight loss. What I would tell you, truth be told, weight loss is a little bit more complicated within just saying it kind of goes back to what she was talking about with variables. You're looking at sleep, you're looking at stress. It's a lot of other things that factor in. And one of the biggest notions is that carbs will make you gain weight. They don't. It's just looking at the better total fuel source package overall. So it comes back to the portions. And what I would tell you is easily starting off with at least the plate and making sense of the portion on your plate. If on days that you've been exercising, you notice you are hungrier, again, you can portion it up a little bit more. It's what I told you. You just still want to balance the whole plate. Sometimes it's hard for me to tell portions just like outright without using like my measuring cups and things. I'm used to doing it like right in front of people. But what I would tell you is there's a lot of tracking systems online these days. I'm not into tracking every day, all day. What I would tell you to do is sometimes tap into some of the different applications. And what they do is, remember what I told you, it's age, physical activity level, and all of those other things that factor into knowing what your total calorie level is. The programs these days calculate it for you, which is really nice, right? And then what it will do is it then deducts or shows how much you need to lose the weight. So what I would do is I would track a few days here and there, see where you're at, where is it meeting on the mark, and then know from there how to adjust maybe a portion size. But I think that my concern sometimes is people will go no carbs and really high protein and veggies thinking that they will lose weight. You will. How? Because I can't tell a lie. Carbs are stored as what? No, but that was excess, yes. It can be stored as partial water too. So if I remove carbohydrates immediately from the get-go, sometimes people will lose 10 pounds in a week. Why? It's water weight. So it's that fine line in looking at upping the exercise, slowly reducing some of the calories in order to create what is that deficit. But it's a little trickier than that, unfortunately, because it comes into so many other parameters and factors. So again, that's where I would tell people, use some of the apps. The technology is there these days. Test it out, measure a few things, see what a portion looks like on your plate. Because that's the other problem. I show a plate like this, but any guesses how big plates are these years? I mean, my mom still has her like Cornell or whatever those like plates are with the blue ridge around the outside. I think some of you probably have them at home too. Corel. See, she knew. Unfortunately, those are the right size plates, and plates these days are 12 inches or more. And if you have a bigger plate, what do? You fill it up. So what I tell people with portions, like sometimes what's easier to do is flip it. You know how they have a salad plate? Use your salad plate for your whole grains and then your protein on top. That big plate, use for your vegetables. Simple as simple can be. You don't have to get caught measuring things up. But if you are curious, sometimes measuring is good to make the connection. Just don't do it every day, all day. That's my suggestion. Proteins. So I have animal sources of protein, and then I'll flip in a second, but since I have problems flipping, I'll do it in a minute. Proteins are definitely for muscles, looking at the repair, maintenance, etc. But it doesn't mean you have to eat protein to get muscles. Okay, the two don't like equate. It comes back into what your training regimen is. I run, and any guesses what my other exercise is that I do? And if you're in the room and you know, you can answer. It is. I do yoga. So I'm using my own body weight as resistance. So you need a mix. I'm not the exercise expert, so I'm not going to like talk distinction of exercise. But you need cardio and you need strength training, right? You need the two things in order to create what it is that you're looking for. For endurance with cardiovascular health, that's your heart, whereas you're looking at strength. And that's another thing back to weight loss. You use calories more efficiently with more muscle mass that you have. So you have to have a balance of the two things within nutrition. It can't just be all cardio because you think you're going to lose the weight that way. It has to be a little bit of the strength. I used my dad in some of the presentations. If he ever came in, he would be mortified. My mom as well. But I saw him the other day. He's going to be 78 years old. This is being televised. He might see it. No, I'm kidding. But he had a heart attack the day after the hurricane. And we have heart disease in our family. He's fine. He's good. Don't worry. I heard the oohs and the ahs. He's fine and he's good. We have heart disease in our family, so we know it's a risk factor, right? What had been happening was his old habits started creeping back in. And he had knee surgery, so he wasn't doing any exercise. So I can't tell you in the older populations, right, how quickly the muscle mass can go like that. He has like no bum and a little bit of a belly right now. So in the last few months since the hurricane, he signed up for the gym and he's been doing strength exercises. I saw muscles reappearing where they never were before. He's always eaten overall really healthy. But again, the point being is over time, you do need to use it or you lose it. And again, within sometimes older populations, you can lose it really quick. So we've been working on trying to really create for him his schedule of looking at protein. He too, obviously within heart disease, we've shifted now and we've been doing even more so just plant-based. But you can get all of your protein needs from plants too, by the way. And I'm not pushing vegetarianism on anyone, but the point being is whether it's animal source or plant source, what I would tell you is people tend to overeat the protein, right? Look at the portion on the plate. It makes up what percentage? Just a quarter. And yes, obviously guys may need more versus women, right? If I'm exercising, I may require a little bit more, that's fine. But when I'm looking at that size amount, people tend to do half a plate. Think about chicken breast size these days, a steak when you go out. So again, these portion distortions are there where we think they're normal and they're not. But a 3 ounce, when you've ever heard someone say, is like the size of the palm of your hand, is there for that reason. Okay? Again, to create the visualization of how much that you need. Okay? So we looked at carbs. We're talking protein. Plant sources, real quick. Where do I get my protein from? Beans also have carbohydrates, though. So if I was using just like my only source of protein, where do I get it from? Vegetables do have it. Nuts and seeds. So this is always where the joke comes out that my brother says, I am what I eat. I am a little nutty. It's all right. But with nuts, what you can do, I keep hitting that chart. With nuts, what you can do is you can turn them into different sauces. I eat all the different nut butters. And then the other thing that you can do with nuts is they call it cheese. It's not cheese, it's a nut. But it does kind of look like a cheese type spread. So you just have to get a little creative with what you're doing, but that could be another really good source. I always get thrown the question, well, aren't nuts really fatty? Haha, which she said it's good fat. So that leads into the next slide in talking about fats. I already mentioned to you that they do provide flavor. I don't spend that much time on the fats, even though it is Heart Health Month this month, only because we're talking nutrition and fats aren't your preferred source of fuel, right? So taking into account it's what you cook with, think about just like animal fats, animal protein and plant-based proteins, fats are distinguished the same way as well. They're from the plant or they're from the animal. And so the choice would be more plant-based fats like a nut, a seed, or the oils. Trans fats are hopefully going to be removed completely from packages in the next year or so, but that would be anything on a label written as partially hydrogenated oil. And then going back into talking about proteins, when you're looking at protein, it's the ranking of, that's why red meat gets the bad rap. It starts off with a higher percentage of animal-based fat, which is the saturated fat. And if it's saturated, it sticks, right? So again, if I was talking turkey, turkey's typically lean, okay? But if you're going in and you're getting ground turkey, any guesses what you might grab? Well, ground turkey is lean. But there's 3 kinds when you go to the store. Right, they can ground the dark meat for sure. So they listed on the packages whether it's 99%, which only means it has 1% fat. It would be the 93% or the 85%. So just be really cautious when you go into the store, I guess is what I'm saying. You walk in thinking, I'm eating turkey, I'm doing lean protein, and you grab the 85%, and you really have a fatty version. So any cut can be ground like that, which is absolutely true. And so it's just paying attention to that. So again, lean proteins overall will end in the title loin, so like a tenderloin of some sort, right? But again, choosing seafood 2 or 3 times a week, stepping outside the box and really trying a few other ones that are lean overall within the complement of your plate. Yeah. For turkey, typically, ground beef is a little different, but they still rank it from so it sounds the opposite of what you would think. It would say 99%, and that means it only has 1% fat. So remember what I said, fat does have flavor, so I don't think you need to go 99% all the time, but then it goes 93 and then 85. I haven't bought ground beef in a long time, but I think they do it at 95%, 90, and then 85 and even 80. So it can be even fattier. I mean, think about it. If I'm doing a burger on the grill, I want a juicier hamburger, but again, are we having burgers every day of the week? I hope not. Celebrations are meant for celebrations. So I'm not a party pooper. I know food tastes good. But again, when you're thinking about it outside the box, it's what are your normal everyday habits? And can I shift things in? When I was younger, I know my mom used to try and put in ground turkey with the ground beef. But it's drier. So if you're trying to cook 99% ground beef, it's really dry. So you'll have to add something in to create a little bit of flavor for it. We'll do our next cooking class. No, I'm kidding. So this brings up the concept of what I talked about, the timing, right? And so again, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. I know when I did the podcast for you all recently, so if you haven't heard it, tap into it on your page. But I'm pretty strict on timing only because I worked in the field of diabetes. And again, I think that sometimes people aren't eating appropriately, and that's why then they're hungry quicker. So I think really tap into, am I hungry? But this is exercise talk today. So again, I think that the 8 a.m. would work if that's what you're snacking on, and then you have a meal at 10:30 because you just exercise, right? So really play into the timing, but just 3 meals a day may not work if you're exercising before or exercising after work. You may need that snack in between. The one on the right is too excessive, by the way. You don't need to be eating 6 meals a day. It's too much. Someone laughed, but I mean, again, it comes back into the notion, and it was brought up, well, what if I want to lose weight? It doesn't speed up your metabolism by eating more like that. Truth be told, exercise is what helps with that and the speeding up of metabolism. But I would be honest in telling you, you really tend to sometimes, I've heard people tell me, well, if I ate that many times, that would open up Pandora's box and I would be eating all day long for sure. I think some people function the other way. But again, go back to what sometimes people eat for breakfast. Cereal. And so if I break it down, cereal is what in my nutrients? I heard sugar, but guys, it's carb, carb, and carb, right? And again, I'm not into the counting of it all the time, but for perspective purposes, I'll use a healthy brand. I don't work for any companies. Kashi is one that tends to make maybe a healthier type cereal if you've seen it out there. But some of their cereals range a cup or 40 grams of carbs. And just to give you guys perspective, that's a meal. And I don't know about you, but a cup of cereal wouldn't fill me up. So if I know I'm eating carbohydrates and then in an hour I'm hungry again, that's where sometimes that's been created where people eat small frequent meals because they're really hungry. Can I make a more balanced meal and tap into some carbs, some protein and some fat to stay fuller longer, right? And again, going back into the exercise part of it, maybe that's a good source of something right prior to an exercise, right? So I don't have to eat that much. It gave me the fuel I need. But again, really start to understand it. If that's what's happened at breakfast and that's why you're hungry at 10 a.m., maybe that's why your meal plan looks like that. So now we're going to talk about amounts. The truth is, I'm going to skip this one because it comes in, and this is a busy slide, and then this way you guys can kind of take a look at it. But when you're looking at exercise, it comes into, is it a meal or the snack? And that depends on the timing of your actual meal. The timing of your exercise. So when you look at the snack component, they say 30 minutes to an hour prior. I think that's a good, solid advice. Again, just know yourself if it's too heavy on your stomach to go closer to the hour, right? If it was a meal and that was your last meal prior, it could be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. So you gauge it. You see what works for you. What would be a good example? I think any fruit works. Okay, if it's like a snack prior, I typically used to use a mix of what they call energy bites, a ball, whatever you want to call them. Power bites is what I used to term it. And that was the concoction that I made. So it had some honey in it, it had some oats in it, and I definitely put peanut butter in it. So that's what I would do, one of them prior to going, right? 30 minutes in, and I was good to go. Any fruit works though. Some of the higher fruits with fiber would be the berries, so I would probably tell you that wouldn't be the best one. Grapes might work, bananas, stuff like that, only because they don't have as much fiber. You see what works for you, but fruits work really, really well. And like I mentioned, if it's really just 30 minutes prior, it might be a piece of white toast, right? I wouldn't put probably butter on top. Again, too much fat, but maybe using just a smear of peanut butter or something like that might work. So just a few suggestions, but again, that's the that's looking prior. During, do you need to drink anything, eat anything during? What do we need to drink? Just water. Oh my gosh, everybody answered the right answer. It's just water. And again, that's under an hour. I'll show you that slide in just a minute. But when you're looking at exercise, again, under an hour, it's just water is all that you need. It's the hydration factor of it. And again, that's kind of prior, pre, during, and after. But you don't need any of the sports supplement drinks unless it's over an hour. What I used to start to notice, it was like right around minute 50. Your body like almost tells you you're starting to have, like get tired, etc. That's when I would start to use some of this stuff because I knew I also was trying to offset how far I was going. But again, the during is just water. And again, if you have kids that play soccer, for example, right? Like with exercise, they're out there for hour and a half at a time. They can munch on pieces of fruit when they come in and they're rotating players in and out. And I was just trying some of those little jelly beans with a friend's kid the other day. He thinks he's like eating candy, right? It's the explanation of talking to him and saying that it's really fuel and he has these choices to pick from to see what really works. Ultimately, he started using grapes. So there you go. You just have to see what works. What's important about after exercise? Yeah, you want to restore what you've used. So if you used any stored fuel, it's a refueling mechanism. I guess what I was also thinking is some of you might say, oh, that's why I want that protein shake. I'm making jokes. It's very common that people will use something intermediate before then they can go home and eat a meal. Okay? I was just catching it before somebody asked me because it's very common right now. But I'd prefer for you to eat food, right? So that might mean that you have to pack something or bring something with you. But ultimately, I think it comes back into the notion that that's where, again, I need a mixture of all the nutrients all over again, a carb, a protein, and some fats to really sustain myself and fill up after I've just worked out. And the last R that they miss, so it's not just refueling, restoring and repairing and rehydrating, etc. It's also rest. I know that when we were doing some exercises, sometimes that's where you'll hear the rotation of what exercise you're doing on certain days. You really do need to let your body rest and so that you're not overusing it as well. The hydration slide we talked about, but again, really truly, your body does show you those symptoms. So pay attention to it. Obviously, the darker in color, the more dehydrated that you are. And I can't stress enough to you, you're looking at, again, where people give the range of 8 glasses of water a day. Food provides water as well. So think about watermelon. That's why its name is called watermelon. It's got a lot of water in it. So the fruits and the vegetables that you include within the day help towards your hydration status. And so I would encourage you for that reason to include those even more so. But also, again, just pay attention because obviously I've been talking a whole hour. I haven't even had enough. So again, I'll make sure throughout the day to continue, but really, truly amply hydrating. Exercise for more than 60 minutes, again, is where the sports drinks are. The one thing I didn't mention was how much you need pre-exercise and during. So when you're talking about pre-exercise for the carbohydrates, you need it's anywhere between 15 to 25 grams of carbohydrate pre-exercise. If you're doing the intensive, exercise past an hour, it's anywhere from 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate. So over a period of time, you separate it out. You don't want to try and do all of it at once. Otherwise, it will dump right out. So kind of spacing it. And that's where with the little kid in soccer, his grapes worked really well. He could take a few every 15, 20 minutes, didn't sit heavy on his stomach, and he was able to kind of shift through his hour and a half game time. Just a few last myths. Again, I think this goes back to the common question. I'm starting out on an exercise regimen and partially I want to lose weight. That's why people start it. That's why people do it. And I think it's a really good question. It's hard for me to gauge and know how much someone needs. And that's where I said tapping into and using some of the applications online these days are really nice because they really truly help tabulate to show you what it is that you're taking in. Maybe you didn't realize that the banana really is 100 calories and 25 grams of carbs. Whereas if I only had a few grapes, I only had 50 or 60 calories, and it actually fueled my energy even better for my exercise that I was doing. So real life application and seeing how it can work to make those more educated ideas about what it is that you can use for fuel. But again, it's a little bit more complicated than just the deficit. You do need to look at some of the duration of your exercise, the intensity, and then also sleep patterns. I know, we're all sleep deprived. We all look at our phone, our tablets. You're paying attention to those things, but again, it really wreaks havoc. Some studies have just recently been released on looking at sleep and how it pertains to weight loss. And that's a whole topic for another day, but truth be told, it does play a direct role. So you can see it can be complicated. It doesn't have to be, start checking things off one thing at a time as you're improving, right? This one is just funny. I mean, obviously, oh, I skipped it. Oh no, there it goes. Yeah, I mean, again, I joked about it earlier. You don't need to eat protein to make muscles, right? It goes back to what your training intensity is and the actual exercise that you're doing. What I would tell you is make sure you're getting enough protein, because that's the number one question asked to me as a vegetarian. Do I get enough? Yes, I do. You know, so again, you're coming back to, I use some of those programs sometimes just to add it up. Occasionally, I do it more for the minerals to make sure I'm getting enough iron and B12, right? Because those would be the two that I'm missing from just a plant-based version. But again, you don't need to eat protein to get muscles. Of course. Yeah, so I used to use, they're all three very similar. These are probably the most common ones to check off and look at your food intake. It would be MyFitnessPal, Lose It, and the last one just has a horrible name, but it's a really good program. It's called Fat Secret. Fat Secret. It's a horrible name. When I used to see people one-on-one, it had a professional link and that people could email me directly is why I used that one. But they all have the same database. I would tell you, I think people use MyFitnessPal the most. It's very nice, like for the exercise component of it. But I think it's nice, like I said, occasionally just to check in and see where you're at. I wouldn't do it all the time. If you eat the same breakfast every day, you don't need to log in what you're eating for breakfast every day. If you're switching up and you're trying to do eggs one morning to get more protein with your whole wheat toast, right? Or you're doing an oatmeal breakfast. Again, oatmeal's like cereal. It can be high carb when now you throw in your dried fruit and your honey or whatever to sweeten it. How can you get the protein in? Nuts. Nut butter, it melts right in. It's really tasty. So that's why I use it for like a capability of seeing where maybe what I already know, like my balance is, that allows for you guys to start inputting a few examples of different meals, okay? Supplements, do you guys need them? I think you guys know my answer. You can get them from food, okay? Ultimately, you don't need supplements daily. I think that the biggest question sometimes comes into, I joked about protein powders, etc. If I ever tell someone to take something, it might just be a multivitamin, right? Those are just nice kind of backup. But really, truly, if you're rotating and getting, you mentioned different colors, different vegetables, fruits, and vitamins and minerals, it's absolutely true. You need every color every day. Right? And so the purples and the blues tend to be the hardest to get, but really challenge yourself to start including them. Whether it's eggplant, the green, purple grapes, purple cabbage, they're out there. It's just a harder one to kind of throw into the mix. The other colors are easier. Last but not least, you guys are starting to work out. You're starting to get your food in. If you are preparing for a race like the corporate run coming up, right? Again, don't try anything new on race day. Really, truly test it out in this next few weeks, right? Where now you're trying to see what works. Timing, I would tell you as I'm wrapping up and telling you, is one of the most important things. When you're looking at exercise, when you're looking at the nutrition and how it applies, really start to trial it out and see what works and rotate through so you can keep it where now you know what the better fuel source is for you. Thank you guys for your time.
Does anybody have any questions? All right, good. Well, thank you, Amy. It was a wonderful presentation. So if you want more information, especially on Baptist Health and Amy Kimberlain, we have the handouts and flyers at the table if you haven't gotten them already. And if you happen to not want any of them, but you still want to ask questions, you can always shoot it towards me at pawswellness@fiu.edu, and I'll make sure it gets to the right place. Okay? So again, thank you for Baptist Health and Amy Kimberlain for exercise and nutrition. So with that, we have a couple things. I have some prizes that we're going to go ahead and give away. You're going to earn them. So first question, does anybody remember our presenter's full name? You don't count. You already knew her. Yes, here you go. So you get one. All right, so then when you answer your questions next time, they'll just be in the back, so don't worry about, having to come up, okay? All right, did anybody sign up for the corporate run yet? Oh, not yet. You will. Did you sign up yet? Anybody sign up? You have a question? What's your question? We're working on it. We've got we do have transportation if you're at BBC, going from BBC to the corporate run. We're working on getting it here too. Okay. All right. So nobody signed up for the corporate run yet, but we do have a team FIU, so you can always email me at that. We have 22 people signed up for it, so make sure that you get on there. So then my next question: does anybody know when the corporate run's date is? April what? 26th, yes, you'll get one of our prizes. Okay, so it's April 26th. So what starts out for that is our Couch to 5K. Does anybody know when the Couch to 5K starts? March 5th, yes. All right, so those are the three winners. Amy Kimberlain was our presenter. April 26th is the corporate run, and the Couch to 5K starts March 5th. Okay. March 5th. That's a Monday. Yes. We'll have more information coming out to you in that regard. Just make sure that you get ready. If you have any interest in it, email me. And if you haven't signed up for our newsletter where everything comes in, again, email me and I can sign you up for the newsletter. We also have our podcast coming out tomorrow, and it touches a lot on what Amy had mentioned in regards to especially metabolism, and then how it plays a role where you increase it and the different types of aspects of nutrition that can help with it. Okay? Yes, you can get her slides. Once she sends it to me, we'll have everything on the video, and the video will also have the slides, and we can do that. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, then I want to thank you for coming. Make sure you sign up for the next one, which will be next month, and I wish you all well. Thank you.